want to spend a few minutes as I welcome you into this academy talking about why the Mission-Driven Mom is building servant leaders and why in the MDM Academy we're becoming servant leaders. And I want to start by telling you the story of a man named John Wollman. He lived in 18th century America. This was actually before the Revolutionary War. And he was one of the religious society of Friends, or the Quakers. Many of the American Quakers were affluent conservative slaveholders. And John Wollman, as a young man, set his goal to rid his beloved society of this terrible practice. 30 of his adult years were largely devoted to this, and by 1770, nearly 100 years before the Civil War, no Quakers held slaves. It is amazing how John Wollman helped this miracle happen, and it was by simple, gentle persuasion as a true servant leader. Here's how he did it. Although John Wollman was not a strong man physically, he accomplished his mission by journeys up and down the East Coast by foot or horseback, visiting slaveholders over a period of these 30 years. The approach was not to censure the slaveholders in a way that drew their animosity. Rather, his approach was to raise questions. What does the owning of slaves do to you as a moral person? What kind of institution are you binding over to your children? Person by person, inch by inch, by persistently returning and revisiting and pressing his gentle arguments over this 30 years period, the scourge of slavery was eliminated from this society, the first religious group in America formally to denounce and forbid slavery among its members. One wonders what would have been the result if there had been 50 John Wollmans, or even 5, traveling the length and breadth of the colonies in the 18th century, persuading people, one by one, with gentle, non-judgmental argument, that a wrong should be righted by individual voluntary action. So I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about this model of servant leadership. It's very simple. The diagram I'm going to draw for you and explain to you is taken from a book called The Servant by James C. Hunter, and that is in the bonus materials for this introductory section in Laws 1 and 2. And you're welcome to read a little bit of that or all of that. But I didn't want to give you one more thing to read because I feel like I can give you a basic overview and summary. This understanding and practice of the principles of servant leadership is something that you're going to do for the next few years while you're with us in the MDM Academy. Day by day, week by week, month by month, you're going to learn one simple principle and practice it, and another simple principle and practice it. And as you do that, you will become a more and more influential servant leader. And I want to show you how it works, how someone becomes a true servant leader. What are the elements of that? Before I get into this model, I want to just emphasize the fact that you, as a mom, already have the most captive audience on earth. You have little people in your home who watch your every move every single day. And that can be scary and overwhelming and intimidating because they get to see all the parts of you. But the beautiful thing is that this means you're already a leader, because people are watching you and modeling your behavior. And all you have to do is become a better leader, more of a true servant leader. And then your children can follow that example to become better servant leaders and mission-driven people in their own right. That is why it's so important that we are becoming servant leaders in the MDM Academy, so that we can first lead ourselves, lead our families, and eventually, and I promise you, if you follow this path, you will eventually be called upon to lead in your community. You don't have to worry about that now. Just start with this learning to love God and love yourself. Now, A simple, very clear definition that James Hunter gives of leadership is something that I really, really like. He says that leadership is simply character in action. Whatever our moral character is at this moment, however much we have developed it in the past, is how we are behaving as a leader right now. He explains that management is what you do and leadership is who you are. Stephen Covey says that management is we manage things and we lead people. So this is about relationships, and your character is your moral maturity. It's the ability to recognize the right thing to do and to do it no matter how you feel about it, and especially when you don't want to do it. James Hunter talks about how character is really bridging that gap between what you would prefer to do and what you know you should do. And over and over again, over time, developing the discipline, winning that battle to do what you know you should do every time. Now, a lot of programs out there, especially when it comes to programs for moms, they're focusing a lot on what you're doing. And you're going to have live-in activities and you're going to practice. You have to do things in the world in order to develop yourself and to live the principles. So we're practicing principles. So what you do really, really matters. But so often these programs are focusing on management and they're focusing on what you're doing, and they're not always focusing enough on who the mom is as a person and the development of her moral character. Because the more the focus is on who you are, the more that will get communicated to your family. So leaders focus on environment, and they earn the right to lead by identifying and meeting the real needs of themselves and the people around them. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but we're going to deep dive into needs a lot, especially in laws 1 and 2. And you're going to come to a deeper and deeper understanding about what that means. But just understand that your job as a leader is to develop your moral character, to do what you know you should do, even when you don't want to build a nurturing, healthy environment, and to identify and meet the real needs of yourself and others. That is how you lead. Okay, the concept of servant leadership, of course, was first really, I don't know, I'm sure it's been talked about all through history, but Jesus Christ really brought it to the forefront, and it's a principle that we really identify with him. He was talking to his disciples, and he was kind of juxtaposing power and kind of authority out there with the kind of leadership that he wanted his disciples to have. And so he talks about how the Gentiles, he says, exercise dominion and they exercise great authority. But it won't be so among you. Whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whosoever will be chief, let him be your servant. And so James Hunter says it really briefly. He just says, who's the greatest leader? The one that serves the most. And so that's what we have to do, is learn how to serve in appropriate ways. So the first element of this servant leadership model is simply the concept of being a leader. And this is, as I said, about character. So a leader is a person of character. Now, the second aspect of true servant leadership is something that James Hunter calls authority. Okay? I'm going to put a little twist on that and talk about it in a little bit different way that I think might be a little bit more helpful for you. People follow a true leader for just two reasons, and only two reasons. The first one is that they trust them, and the second one is that the leader has identified where they're going, and it's a place that person wants to go. So I'm only going to follow someone if I really know what they're doing and I really want to go where they're saying they're going to lead me. So I can't follow them if there's not high trust, and I can't follow them if they don't know where they're going, and I won't follow them if I don't want to go where they're going. Okay? So trust is foundational, and so I'm going to put that right here by authority. Okay. So if you're truly going to lead, you're going to build authority. And you build authority by earning people's trust, okay? He makes a difference, he kind of demonstrates the difference between what we might call power, someone who has a position or who has the ability to force you to do things. It's really kind of the difference between a leadership model of force and a leadership model of freedom. People only follow you because they see you as an authority. This can get confusing when you talk about the concept of authority in terms of, oh, well, they are in a position of power. That's not what Hunter means. He means that you see them as an authority because you trust them and you want to go where they're going. Now, it's important to understand that all relationships are built on trust. It is the foundation. You kind of don't have a relationship with someone unless there's some level of trust. So the way that we trust God to a greater and greater degree is the principle of faith, and we will get into that more in Laws 1 and 2. That is a function of faith. We identify what God would have us do, and we act on those things. Faith is a principle of action and power. And so as we act, so our power increases, which is why when we talk about self-leadership in the center sections of each of the cycles, we're talking about increasing our personal power because we're practicing better principles and we're acting in faith on that principle, trusting that if we live it, if we change ourselves, we will have better results. That's an act of faith, and it increases power. Okay, so you act in faith to increase your trust in God. So how do you increase your trust in yourself? Because that's where we're going to start. There are three components of trust in any relationship. They are integrity, capacity, and communication. Okay, so if you want to trust yourself better, you need good communication with yourself, clarity about what your goals are, intention about moving toward them, constant reminders of what it is that you're working on, but also good language with yourself, talking to yourself in ways that are encouraging and uplifting and optimistic. You need integrity, meaning that you do the things you tell yourself that you'll do. That bridging that gap again between what we're saying and what we're doing, who we want to be and who we are. And so you need to grow in your integrity. You need to do the things you know you should do. And then you need capacity. And for a lot of our MDM moms, that's a big piece that was missing. They wanted to show up for themselves and do things that they felt that they should do, and they definitely wanted to talk better about them to themselves, about themselves, in relationship to themselves, but they didn't always know how. They didn't always know what to do. They needed skills, they needed tools. So you'll notice if you're looking for those all throughout your journey in the MDM Academy, you'll notice that we're encouraging you to increase your integrity, to increase your capacity, and to better your communication, more of it and better quality of it with yourself, with God, and with everybody else. And so those three components are really, really important to keep in mind. We'll work on them more. Your relationships right now with God and yourself are the goal. And when you get into Law 3, you'll start working on your relationship with yourself. It'll be awesome. Stephen R. Covey or something like that, Stephen Covey's son, wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And in that he talks more about your relationship with yourself. He says that self-trust is a function of harmony between your principles, your motives, your capabilities, and your track record. And so if you don't have a really great track record, you might not trust yourself as well. If you aren't sure what your governing principles and values are, if you know you have the wrong intentions, you won't really trust yourself. If you're just trying to shut somebody up and not really teach them and love on them, you'll know that. So those are 4 things you can also think about in terms of you trusting yourself. The inner motives are the inner self is the principles and the motives, and the outer self is the capability and the track record. So that's another thing to think about as you strive to show up for yourself better, to love yourself to a greater degree. You've got to trust yourself in order to love yourself better. And the 4 tendencies test is going to help you know how you are accountable to people, and will give you some better ideas about how to hold yourself accountable and utilize other people to hold yourself accountable as well. So how do we then gain authority? We know some ways that we can earn trust, that we can better trust God, we can better trust ourselves, and we want other people to trust us. We want to have authority, especially with our children, so that we can lead them, which is about getting people, this is a really good way of thinking about it, getting things done through people. So in order to do that, we have to have their trust. And another important part of gaining trust is to speak truth. So if you're trying to get yourself to do something or somebody else, but you know you aren't sure that what is being taught is truth, then you won't always have the internal motivation and desire to follow that. And so we earn authority with people and with ourselves, because we need to be an authority in our own lives. We need to know that we can trust ourselves and that we can lead ourselves properly, and then we can lead other people as well. And so we need to know the truth, and we need to teach the truth and live the truth. And in that way, we will also gain more authority. So the way that we gain that authority and speak out that truth is through service and sacrifice. This is, again, about meeting needs. Real and legitimate needs. And we've got some readings on that, and we've got a video all on that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that, but you need to understand that boundaryless rescuing, we're going to learn a lot about rescuing in the drama cycle and being a creator and why that's so important, and how to recognize and meet real and legitimate needs. When you do that, you are truly serving and sacrificing. And when you are focused on wants, or other people are telling you what they want, and you're focused on the wants, or when you're not showing up for people when they need something, when you're withholding how you feel because you're scared to tell the truth, all of those things aren't actually meeting the real needs of yourself and other people. And you're going to get a lot of opportunities to practice that and to understand the difference between recognizing and meeting real needs, or rescuing, or all the other things that we do instead of meeting needs. Now, what causes us to sacrifice and serve others? What's the driving force behind that? Why would we do that? And the simple answer is love. When we were building the MDM Academy, it was fascinating how often we would get through all kinds of readings and we would have all kinds of discussions. And at the end, we would just realize that ultimately it was all about love. And that we as a society do not understand love very well. We think a lot of the things that we do and say are loving, and they're not. And we don't really understand how to truly love God, love ourselves, love truth, love humanity. And so that's what we're here to do. Love is that binding element for all of these foundational laws of life mission. It's the through line for everything that we're doing. We use Scott Peck's definition that love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. And by spiritual, he means the whole person. He means we're not ignoring the soul or the mental or the emotional or any of the pieces of that person or of ourselves. We are extending ourselves, extending the will to meet real needs, to nurture one's own or another's growth. And it's fascinating to me that James Hunter created this model, and it really aligns with this definition, which of course I found James Hunter way after these other things. And so often this truth just all combines. So what is it that drives love? It's the will. And again, we're going to talk a lot about willingness. There's a whole video on that. We're going to go into a lot of detail about what is the will, how do we exercise the will, how do we use it to nurture our own and others' growth, what does it mean to be willing, and what does it mean to be willful, and how we can be more humble, how we can be more teachable, how we can really be willing to submit to the truth and let it make us free. That's what we're here to do. So just quickly to recap this model of servant leadership that we're going to utilize all throughout the Academy. It begins at the top. We want to be leaders. That means we must be people of character. That means we must bridge the gap between what we know we should do and what we're actually doing. And that's a practice all our lives long. We can develop our character all our lives. It's something we have complete control over. And we truly lead ourselves and others when there's high levels of trust and we see ourselves and others see us as true authorities. We become authorities when we sacrifice and serve, and we do that by recognizing and meeting real needs. We want to do that because we truly love, and the motivation to love comes from an act of the will, and will is intention plus action. So a perfect example of this whole model is Martin Luther King Jr. And if you learn a little bit about his life, you'll see that he first worked on his character, and he was a man of true, deep integrity who had paid a price to have an incredible education, to learn many of the things that we talk about in the Academy. You'll read some of his writing later on in the Academy. He definitely had authority. People trusted him implicitly because he was a man of character and because he spoke truth. He delineated first principles and principles for people that they intuitively knew to be true. That resonated with them, and they wanted to follow him. They saw him as their authority. He had no formal leadership position. He sacrificed and served by recognizing true legitimate needs. He used nonviolent resistance. He found that in scripture. He went to Gandhi to learn how to live it out in the world, and it meant marching and going to prison and being beaten, and he taught his people how to take all of the beatings and all of the shaming and all of the pain in order to reach a higher good. He ennobled them. He brought out the best in them. They were better people because of him. And he didn't just ask them to run off and do it without him. He suffered alongside them. He walked those roads with those that followed him. And he did it out of love. He said that Christ furnished the spirit and motivation while Gandhi furnished the method. And so that driving love that came from his will, his desire to nurture himself, he talks about wanting a better life for his children, a better culture, a better circumstance for them to live in, where there was a greater abundance of love. And he talks about love often as the driving force behind everything that he was doing. And so he earned the trust of his people, and they followed him until he transformed the world. He set an unbelievable example, and people followed him until there were greater rights for Black Americans. Our definition here at the Mission Driven Mom and in the MDM Academy, taken from all of these sources, is servant leaders consistently increase their influence by actively developing their character, meeting real needs, and applying principled solutions. So that is what we're doing here. That is what we're working toward. Leadership is getting through things done through people, accomplishing the task at hand while building the relationship. And that's something that every mom wants. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to join you on this journey to become the very best servant leader you can possibly be. I know the joy and the insights and the epiphanies that await you, and I'm excited to be walking this path with you. See you next time.